And
Man.
take it away, Rob.
Hey,
Oh, wow. I mean, man, oh man. Wow. That one was awesome. I mean, the Celtics total domination, not domination all game, but in that fourth quarter, it was total domination for the Boston Celtics as they pull away with a 127-120 win over the Minnesota Timberwolves at home for the 18th straight time this season, 18-0 at home. The best start in Celtics history at home for the Boston Celtics tonight, guys. It was an epic battle between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown in the best team in the Western Conference. Franco, start us off. Your initial thoughts, your reactions from tonight's, a game of the year probably in the NBA.
yeah, 100% game of the year for the Boston Celtics, let alone the NBA so far. What a dogfight. I mean, Minnesota, they were missing Mike Conley tonight, and they were also missing Rudy Gobert, two key veterans that play significant roles on this team. But they still were able to match up with the Boston Celtics defensively. They were able to keep our number throughout the first three quarters. It was back and forth throughout the entire game. And then during the fourth, we just saw the Celtics, what we thought, like we've been saying for the past couple games. I mean, there's a few teams on the Celtics kryptonite list. Of course, Miami Heat, Minnesota, Indiana, any young team, Orlando Magic, any young team or anyone who is going to bring a physical battle to this Boston Celtics team is going to be able to test them. But the Celtics were able to pull it off tonight, and the fact Jason Tatum was able to step up big in overtime was a huge statement. And I honestly think the Boston crowd is such a six-man advantage to this team because they understand and value this home court record. I was just listening to the post game show over on NBCSN. They have J- Jason Tatum heard about the record, fist bump Abby Chin before the game, knowing that how important this game was, and it just gives them a lift that just makes them unstoppable.
I mean, this was the absolute moment of the season thus far. I know it's only January 10th, and there will be more moments in the season, we know, way down the road in the playoffs, of course. However, tonight against the Minnesota Timberwolves, we will not see this iteration of the Wolves again until we either face them in the finals or we somehow keep the rosters the same over the summer and meet up again next season, because this one coming into it was a little bit of a damper with Rudy Gobert being out, Mike Conley, Kristaps Porzingis. We still knew these two teams, with the talent still out on the floor, they were going to come and play. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, they traveled to Boston. Their flight gets delayed last night. They don't get into Boston until 12:33 this afternoon, 33 p.m., 12:33 p.m. that is. And they play a game 6 hours later at the Garden. And credit to them, they really didn't look like a team that just got off the plane a couple of hours ago, literally. And we're not talking about the morning, we're talking about the afternoon. And I really thought at a certain point in this game, I think we all thought at a certain point in this game that the Celtics' home winning streak was going to come to an end. I mean, it really looked inevitable. It was 105-94. I even posted about it. I had the photo with Tatum, and he was looking up at the score, and it really looked like this was just going to be one of those games. And Rob, you even texted in our group chat, this is going to be the first concerning game. And we'll get to the logistics of this full entire game. And I'm sure there are going to be points to hit on what the Celtics did well and what they didn't. However, the entirety of this game, the fact the Celtics came back in such a way late in the fourth quarter and in overtime, Franco, you said it best. This Celtics crowd, the TD Garden crowd, they're the best crowd in the entire NBA. Let that be known, because I've been to a couple of NBA arenas this year, and I have not seen an arena that matches the Boston Celtics crowd at TD Garden at all. The atmosphere, the really fans just being on top of each other. And Rob, you were there tonight along with Ian. You guys can tell it best. That energy, the energy that's collected inside of that building once the Celtics run transpires, it's absolutely tremendous to watch. And on TV, you can feel it. You can feel it through the television screen, not even being there. And
Right.
to see that from a crowd and from a basketball team, it's certainly a unique situation in the NBA. And you see the dominance in which the team can fall into if they ride the wave of that home crowd. And of course, playing the way they know how to play, which they did exactly that in the fourth quarter and overtime of this game to bring out the 127 to 120 win over the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I'm just hyped up after this game, y'all, because this game, I mean, come on. We were supposed to come in here and talk about, oh my goodness, this Celtics team. We lost. We chucked up a bunch of threes. We were a bunch of shot chuckers the whole game. We couldn't hit a shot for half this game. Couldn't stop anybody. Nikhil Alexander Walker and Kyle Anderson cooked us. But no. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they combined for over 70 points tonight, and they bring out a win over a team that's being touted so much in the national media because they're a part of this new talent circle. The Indiana Pacers, the Orlando Magic, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Minnesota Timberwolves. All of these teams are the new talents in the league, the new young talented teams. Everybody, they're all oohing and ahhing over them, but everybody forgets who the real talents are in the NBA sometimes, and that is Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and the Boston Celtics as a whole. They've been the real top contender this entire time over the past, well, now almost half part of the decade now. We're almost to 2025, only 11 months away all of a sudden. And the Boston Celtics, after this game, come on, folks. Come on in the national media. Give us our praise. Give us our praise. Whew.
It was it was a gut check win. I will say that, no doubt about it. They were clutch in every aspect. Brown and Tatum, let's not get it twisted. This was their show. White, Holiday, Horford, they were, they made some winning plays time and there and there, here and there, but it was Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. It was those two, 1A, one being the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jaylen Brown's defense tonight against Anthony Edwards was all defensive first team worthy. He said before the season started that defense was something that he really wanted to embrace this year. He wanted to become the best possible defensive player he could. And that's exactly what he put on display tonight for the whole entire world to see. It was special performance out of those two. It was really a playoff game. And, you felt that this Timberwolves team does not play fast. They play slow. They like to slow the pace down. They like to trap
Allen
you.
Henderson's on the court.
Right? They like to trap you on in that half court defense. They play tough. They play physical. They play slow. It was a playoff atmosphere in the Garden. The place was bumping. I mean, it was truly a big time win. As you take a look at tonight's game tracker for tonight's matchup versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, it was really a tale of two halves. Boston had it through the first half in a wire-to-wire fashion. Minnesota obviously came out of the half and grabbed that lead. And then throughout the, again, story of the year, the second half of that third quarter into the beginning of the fourth, it was all Minnesota Timberwolves. They stretched the lead up to as much as 9 until the Boston attack came back in. And then eventually they grabbed it in the overtime behind a Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown masterclass. Franco, something we've been talking about all season long are free throws. How about tonight? Jaylen Brown, for the first time in his NBA career, his 8-year NBA career, was perfect from the foul line on 10 or more attempts, 13 of 13. How about Jason Tatum, 11 of 12, the two of them combined, 24 of 25. The free throws were clutch down the stretch. And how big was tonight's free throw shooting for the Boston Celtics in this victory?
Made the entire difference tonight. And that's something that is simple, fundamental. And I heard Joe Mazzulla talk about a pregame. That is something that they focused on heading into this game and into this second series of a doubleheader is their free throw percentage. In the 2 games in Indiana, they were shooting extremely poor from the free throw line, and we're missing out on around 8 or 10 points per game that are given to them. And that's something that usually just comes with confidence. And there are off nights here and there, but it's something that should be able to be taken for granted is the free throw line and the fact that they were able to score there and go 13 of 14 from both of them, eh, shooting at that high of a stroke. And that's also a credit to them getting to the paint. I mean, most of the time you're not seeing these guys go towards the paint. And as Justin was saying in our talk during the game, is Jason Tatum's 3-point pulling and not taking those open shots, trying to get to the lane. I think he's just missing out on those. And once he clicks in and once he finds the 2-point shot, the 3-point shot comes hand in hand. So once he starts driving, that's when I think it's best for him.
I mean, tonight was big time. And I think it was a championship performance and a championship effort from the team. And something that I was listening to 98.5 The Sports Hub on the way home from the Garden. And something they were saying was this was a game in which the roles of each individual player on the Boston Celtics was so apparent. Drew Holiday and Derek White did not have it going from the floor shooting wise. What did they do? They made every winning play they possibly could outside of scoring. Al Horford was doing his most defensively in spacing and was big time in the pick and pop. And then Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were the two engines that led this train run tonight. How many times in the past years have we been telling ourselves, why hasn't Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown been having the ball in their hands? Why does the offense get stagnant down the stretch? Tonight, everyone played their role. Brown attacked exactly when he was supposed to and needed to. And Jason Tatum I thought his shot selection down the stretch was perfect. I think he attacked the rim exactly when he needed to attack the rim. And I think he was settling from threes exactly when he needed to. I mean, the roles were so apparent. It was perfect, Seamus. And do you think that down the stretch is the biggest change between, outside of the talent, obviously, between this year's team and the previous year's Celtics teams are the roles and how everyone is playing them?
I believe that's part of the case, but I also believe it's part of decision making as well, because tonight's game, I think down the stretch, we saw some pretty elite decision making by the Celtics, and it really just comes within patience on offense and really in hectic situations. Brian Scalabrine, he's been on the broadcast for quite a while now, all of a sudden, now almost 5 years. And I remember him talking a couple of years ago about how a lot of plays in the NBA go simply awry, and they just don't go as planned, either defensively, whether you're switching and rotating defensively, that's not going to go as planned every single possession, and offensively there are going to be moments where you're going to run an offensive set, it's disrupted, and you're only going to have a couple seconds to shoot. And in those moments, how good is a team or players at reconciling those moments? And I thought tonight there were a lot of hectic moments down the stretch in this game. There were a lot of one-on-one,
Right.
slow possession moments, but in between there were a lot of loose ball, back rim, a lot of misses down the stretch. I thought I saw, I don't know what the exact percentages were, but a lot of misses from both teams down the stretch. And I thought amidst the chaos, the Celtics did a great job at reconciling their offense and finding great shots, even when they didn't go in down the stretch of this game. And I thought that was the biggest factor in them winning this particular game, outside of Tatum and Brown being absolutely elite, as you guys talked about, and just the overall decision making of the team being patient. And that does come with players knowing their role within the offense, knowing their role on defense as well. And these are just different players than we've had in the past. Drew Holiday is completely new. Kristaps Porzingis was not in the lineup tonight. No Rudy Gobert, nor Mike Conley in this game either. And having those two guys in the lineup is certainly a different look. No Porzingis tonight, but you still have Holiday there and White from 2 years ago. That's still a different look than what we've been used to in Marcus Smart. Derek White is taking over the usage of what Marcus Smart once had for the Celtics, and of course, some of that is being allocated to Porzingis and Tatum and Brown. But for the overall team, I think the roles and the decision making just we've talked about it at many post games in the past. This is a prime level team. A lot of these guys are now seasoned. We don't have any young players out there running around on court, and it all comes within that experience on court consistently over time. That repetition, just that those little decisions made down the stretch that can change an entire game, change the entire complexity of a team's offense, the team's defense, and how they operate throughout a season. And you see tonight, an elite team like the Celtics, the Minnesota Timberwolves probably win this game, against 28 other teams, right? And the Celtics, they're probably the one team in the NBA, and this is why they're the best team in the NBA, in my personal opinion, that could have came back down the stretch against the Timberwolves, and of course did tonight. And it's all because of that decision making. It's all because of that experience and that veteran leadership that's on the squad, and of course players unselfishly knowing their role, as we talked about. But I do want to talk about this real quick. I know I've gone on a long tangent. The free throw shooting, quick shout out. 30 of 31 tonight after 52% game 1 in Indiana, 69% game 2 in Indiana. Like I said, there was no Gronk. I didn't see him paying homage to Gronk out there. And tonight, 30 of 31, that's pretty acceptable. They missed one free throw. Cannot really trash them for that 96% on the night. That is, right. Congrats, Boston Celtics. You're hitting your free throw.
Let's just preference something too on the free throw shoot. And I will say, shout out Derek White, because he made that one free throw miss really, really non-existent and irrelevant, because it would have been a bashing on the free throws again tonight if it wasn't Derek White. And that is my point. Winning cures everything. Now, you might ask, guys, how great were Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum tonight? Well, let me show you. Players of the game. And we've never done this in Celtics Talk Weekly history. 3 years now coming up on, well, technically this is our third year doing these post-game shows. We have never had a players of the game, but you know what? It was well deserved. It was an efficient and it was a proactive master class from the Jays tonight. The league's best duo. How about 80 combined points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and a block for the two of them tonight? 50% from the floor. Can we talk about something real quick? Jaylen Brown, 35 points on 16 shots is efficient. Got to the free throw line 13 times. Jason Tatum, 45 points on 13 made field goals, 6 of 11 behind the arc. The game always opens up for JT when the shot is falling from behind the arc. We saw that yet again tonight, Franco. Again, I know we've talked a lot about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, but we have seen, and it's something Seamus and I have talked about last post-game show, with how this gauntlet of a January is so important for the Celtics, and we recognize that. But it's also important for Jason Tatum because he's had a little rough go about it. Well, Franco, this is the 4th straight game this year that Jason Tatum has had 30-plus points since the flip of the calendar. This one was a 45-point night. It kind of feels like we're entering the MVP campaign potentially from Jason Tatum. What has he been doing over the past couple games that have really impressed you so far in how he's been able to open the game up for himself?
And this is usually when we do see this Jason Tatum come out, is around MVP time, around All-Star voting, around All-NBA consideration time. This is when he usually puts on his best shows and is when the team's starting to go through the thick phase of the season. And I think it's just a result of him finally feeling comfortable around the players that he's surrounded with. I mean, as we've said, the addition of talent onto this team has been an adjustment for both these star players, but Jason Tatum is starting to stop really forcing his shots and is letting the game come to him in a sense. I mean, Drew Holiday and Derek White did a great job of feeding him open looks, and he was able to feed off of Jaylen Brown tonight. And what I really liked was the fact that when he wanted to find his groove and he missed a 3-pointer or two in a row, he resulted right back to cutting right back into the lane and going for the easy layup or the drawn foul. And the free throws, as we touched on earlier, very important, and those give him 13 points, and without those he would have 32. And this team just needed that type of performance from him, and the fact that Jaylen Brown was able to perform as well is exactly what we need to see from this team if we want to see a playoff run again. I mean, sometimes it's been on and off. Sometimes it's Jason's night, sometimes it's Jaylen. When they are coherently playing, as the stat remains, they have only lost one game when they score above 30.
They were firing at all levels tonight. And again, it was a championship level performance from championship level players in a championship level team. Something I do want to address as well. Joe Mazzulla, I thought he was awesome tonight, guys. I thought he was calling great timeouts down the stretch. I think his adjustments were there. I think he slipped up to begin the fourth quarter, allowing Luke Cornett to be in the game. Personally, it was terrible. I mean, they went at him for 3 straight possessions, and when could have been a Celtics run wasn't due to the fact that Minnesota exploited the defensive inability of Luke Cornett. However, on a night in which you don't have Kristaps Porzingis active in the lineup, those are tough decisions to make. Outside of that, and the final timeout challenge, it was questionable on whether to do it or not. On one end, if you get it right, you win the game. On the other end, if you don't get it right, you're putting your team in a position to potentially, in a position in which they struggle in, Seamus. But overall, Mazzulla, have not had much negative to say on him over these past couple months. What has he been doing so well that has allowed the Boston Celtics to really jolt forward with now a 4-game lead in the Eastern Conference?
Well, I feel like I should nitpick the one thing he didn't do well tonight and then go on to say what he did do well, because this one little moment I do want to point out in the game where it was like, all right, what happened here? It was the last possession down near the end of the fourth quarter, the last Timberwolves possession, where Anthony Edwards drives to the rim. A foul is called on Derek White, who appears to go straight up, but he kind of turns his body. And in my mind, it was blatantly obvious that it's a foul because, yes, he was straight up in the air. He was straight up and down. You got that right. But he wasn't square at all in his stance, and he was moving to the side, and he's kind of pulling the chair on him at that point. Derek White was on Anthony Edwards. And it's kind of a blatantly obvious call. And Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics, they just throw out their last time out. They challenged the call, and essentially what I believe was blatantly obvious, the broadcast, we all were it's like the Indiana call the other night. We all thought it was blatantly obvious. That one went the other way. Maybe this one will go our way. Of course it didn't, because it was a foul on Derek White. We lost our last time out, and you see what happened on the last possession of the game. Jason Tatum dribbles into a terrible contested mid-range shot in which we've seen so many times in hectic situations without an ATO drawn up or just without a general timeout called at all. It's Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown taking an ISO shot one-on-one against one or two defenders contested, usually from the mid-range or from real deep, to win the game or to tie the game down the stretch. And we just want to see those. We want to tweak those down the stretch, because I thought tonight the Celtics, they had a chance to win the game because they had the last possession of the game without overtime. And what happened in overtime was amazing. And at that point in the game, it did feel like the Celtics had momentum to go win in overtime. But I don't necessarily like the execution of just throwing away the last time out and then letting it play out, because time and time again, we've seen what happens when it plays out. Bad shot selection down the stretch, and we're either walking away with an L or we're going to overtime. And thankfully tonight we had the momentum, but on other nights we're going to be talking about that in a different light. That being said, outside of that little general mistake, not that big of a mistake because it didn't cost the Celtics a win, and you can still argue that, oh yeah, the Celtics had momentum and go ahead, burn the timeout. Maybe we win because what we saw in Indiana the other night. But that being said, Joe Mazzulla has seen a spectacular run over the past month, and I believe it's coming within letting guys, that cohesion that they're building, letting guys cohesively build with each other on court on either end of the floor. And we talked about at the beginning of the season if it was kind of, maybe the method of letting players take over more often than not was going to be a little bit of a detriment to the Celtics because they're not as, say, organized as a team strictly like, say, the New York Knicks. I'm not saying the New York Knicks are better than the Celtics, but no players are making their own decisions on the New York Knicks. It's strictly Tom Thibodeau. And I believe that cohesion within the Celtics offense and defense, we're seeing a lot of defensive schemes that you simply, I look at other young teams around the league. I go, there's no way the Pistons could run this defensive scheme right now where you have one player like Drew Holiday essentially playing safety in the middle and you're playing like a half zone, half man, and you're kind of switching in between when you want to, like you're kind of hunting, like you're switching the hunting, right? Every team on offense, they're hunting for mismatches on offense. Like, okay, we want to get matched up on this guy. But it's like the Celtics are playing defense and they're hunting for the best defensive matchup. And it's like that's a whole new complexity to the game that some other teams just cannot reach. And Joe Mazzulla, being their head coach, he's a huge part of that and putting that all together. Sure, the players have a huge part in that as well, being the versatile high IQ players they are: Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis. However, Joe Mazzulla, he still has to implement a game plan, and he's been a huge part, specifically defensively, of what they've done, but offensively too, getting guys better quality shots within the offense. I think I talked about that earlier. I think that comes more within decision making and making the extra pass and just staying within the flow of the offense and not forcing shots, because I did think we saw it throughout tonight's game where the team just settled a little bit too often, and then down the stretch we kind of saw that in OKC too, where you're finding the better shot because you simply need points, and that's what happened down the stretch. They were down 9, needed points. Offense, they do what they do, and it turns up.
I think that, again, that final play, it's an example. Jason Tatum free throw. If White doesn't get that rebound, we're not here talking about the great free throw shooting performance tonight from the Celtics. We're talking about how their inability to hit free throws down the stretch is costly. Mazzulla wins that challenge. We're talking about how he's been phenomenal in the challenges this year and how it was a big time challenge to win the Celtics the ball game. So again, it's really how you see it. Personally, I'm with you, Seamus. You got to know what situations your team's good in. The Celtics are running and going for the game winner off the rebound improvly has not been their strong suit this season or really ever. So again, my preference would be know your team, understand the situation. It was only a 2 tie game. You get final shot at home with Jason Tatum having an MVP caliber performance. So I think in that aspect, again, do I hate the challenge? No, because again, if you win it, you win the game, and it's like awesome. It's great. However, it wasn't important enough, and the opportunity was still there for the Celtics to win the game. In that timeout could have been huge, and again, it could have eventually hoped maybe save some legs. Again, we got Milwaukee tomorrow night. We had to play an overtime game tonight, so obviously overtime wasn't ideal tonight, but it's how the Celtics have to get it done. Other than that, though, obviously not a lot from the bench tonight. It was a rugged, star driven performance for the Celtics. But again, guys, I mean, it was an offensive masterclass, but I want to talk about the defense. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown defensively were arguably better tonight than they were offensively, and that's saying something from the superstar duo. How many times has an all-star, superstar, MVP caliber player walked into the TD Garden, it felt like, over the past 2 years, and have given us the business? Trae Young in Game 5 of last year's first-round performance. James Harden in Game 1 of the second round. Jimmy Butler, Game 6 of that 2022 championship run where he had that 40-point performance out at the TD Garden. Your superstar players need to make superstar plays. And tonight, the look on Jaylen Brown's face, obviously, again, I was there tonight. It was this Kobe Bryant-esque, I'm not letting you win. If you want to beat me, it's coming through me. And it was your turn, my turn. Brown, Tatum, they played beautifully and intertwined their games beautifully. It was poetry in motion tonight, guys, from how elite they were from the defensive aspect. I mean, the critical, crucial stops they got on Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns down the stretch was, I mean, it was critical for the Celtics win tonight, Franco. But, I mean, how special is it to have guys who can go out and get you 45 apiece each on the same night, but also be the ones to step up and guard the best players and defend home court? How big is that?
The fact that the Celtics team was able to match up with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and we have to credit the Timberwolves tonight. I mean, Anthony Edwards brought it to Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown tonight, and tonight was one of the better performances I've seen from Karl Anthony Towns in a little bit of time. I mean, he had 25 points and 13 rebounds, and the fact that they were able to keep up with this Minnesota team and a game that felt like one of those games that the fourth quarter is just going to slip away from them because they're outgassing them. I mean, all of our starters were playing north of 40, and it just felt like one of those games that, we would have probably lost if Mike Conley or Rudy Gobert are in the rotation, but the fact that this team was able to pull through defensively, find those matchups, as we were saying, Anthony Edwards, we were able to give them discomfort in those final stages during the fourth quarter, and those final 5 minutes was just the Celtics taking over the game.
Right. And who remembers about 2.5 months ago on the road in Minnesota, a certain someone by the name of Anthony Edwards put on a clinic in overtime and got defensive stops on our best players in an overtime win at home against the best team in the opposite conference? Who remembers that game? What was that? Oh, right. That was against the Boston Celtics. Well, tonight, they returned the favor. And that is, we've been talking about, does this team have that gut in them, right? When a team throws a blow and you're on the ground and you're just bleeding and your blood's on the canvas, is this team going to step up, stand up, and keep taking blows? And they're going to deliver them. Are they going to do that? Do they have that fight in them? Tonight, they showed me that in a must-win game for history, in a game that really was the first game all year, guys, that had meaning. There was something to be played for tonight. It was history. It was the best home start in Celtics history since Bill Russell and Bob Cousy were running the hardwood back in the 50s. That's how, that was the last time a Celtics team had started out as good as this team. And we passed them. The 8 titles in a row, 60s Boston Celtics were the last time to do what this team just did. And what they were able to deliver was phenomenal. And I have to give them their flowers. However, it's been 40 minutes of great basketball talk. There are some things you have to tap into. In every win, there are, again, what's been Celtics Talk Weekly's thing this year, guys? It's been bookmark, circle, highlight things, and let's readdress them. Problem 1, free throws. Check. So far, that highlight can get checked off for tonight. We will address it another time. Third quarters, highlight and double. I'm highlighting that third quarter double. We are still struggling, and I don't know what it is. I'm starting to get the sense that teams are picking up on it, and they're pushing the pace. So, Seamus, I mean, again, winning cures everything, but it was bad in that third quarter. We allowed Minnesota to kind of retake the momentum, and thankfully they were able to find their dog in them later down the road, and eventually were able to pull out the win in overtime. But third quarters, something we've been highlighting, and it's something we're talking about in an overtime win at home for the record. Where are you at with the third quarters?
Well, I believe this is somewhat laced in the fact that we did not have Kristaps Porzingis again tonight because, again, this is another game where I feel like every single time we have a problem in the third quarter, it's usually due to this. One player goes out of the lineup due to injury, and then subsequently we have to reinsert different players into the lineup in the third quarter, rearrange the lineups just a bit after the starters begin the third quarter, and from that point it's like, okay, we're not exceeding exactly how we should in those moments. However, I will say there is a little bit of a grain of salt to be taken that usually one player is out of the lineup when we see these problems, and it's every game. I mean, think about in Indiana in the third quarter of that first game. Now we did pull out that game, but Indiana did make their run in that game as well in the third quarter, and then Porzingis, I believe, was not playing that game after the first quarter. Yes, after the first quarter, Porzingis was out of that game. And then the second game, no Jason Tatum at all. We struggled in the third quarter again. Tonight, no Porzingis. We struggled in the third quarter again. So I feel like there's somewhat of an explanation to what happens when we do let go of the rope in the third quarter, because I thought when everybody was in the lineup throughout the whole month of December, you did see a lot of success in those third quarters and just leveling out the playing field. And there are a lot of game trackers we can go back and look at where the Celtics take off in the third quarter and the fourth quarter and just run away with the game. And those are against more inferior opponents, but they do have the data on the board. This game tonight, I will say, you can tell it's one of those elite matchups on the season. And it's a big shame for the NBA that this one wasn't on ESPN. It wasn't on NBA TV. It wasn't on TNT, because this truly may have been the game of the season. Looking at it from start to finish, it was back and forth, stars dueling each other, goes to overtime. One team has to make a valiant comeback, eventually does on their home floor. And you can tell from the bench scoring in this one and who's involved in big moments that, yep, these are two elite teams. Because on some nights we go and face the Indiana Pacers and we talk about, oh, look, Lou Cornett was good in this game. O'Shea Brissett was good in this game. Ooh, Peyton Pritchard. But when we really go up against opponents like the Bucks, the Sixers, the Heat, now all of a sudden the Timberwolves, even the Nuggets, we don't hear anything out of the bench. We just simply don't. And that's a little bit, we talked about the bench being a little bit thin. We've given the praise to the bench in the rightful sense when they have succeeded with this roster. However, you did see in these matchups, you can tell that they are the big hitters, because the Celtics bench, not really showing up in these type of games the way that we typically would like to see our depth show up in other games. But this game as a whole, I mean, just outrageous, the entirety of the flow of the game. And I for what the Celtics did in the third quarter, those problems need to be wiped up, no doubt. But this team's ability to come back from that adversity now, instead of just spiraling out of control. And let's note this too, for multiple games, they lost in Oklahoma City. What did they do? They came back and blew out the Utah Jazz. They go and avenge a loss in Indiana. The next night, unfortunately, we're completely hosed. Everybody saw it. He was hit in the head. We know. And then what do we do tonight? Could have easily rolled over in this game once we were down 9 with 5 minutes left. And what happens? We're talking about a 7-point win in overtime. And that's certainly a corner that the team has turned, even though they still have some of these third quarter woes to wipe up. And you think about, if they do wipe up the third quarter woes, what it can look like. Some of these lead trackers on other nights, what they do look like. I truly believe now 18-0 on their home floor, the Celtics are, the 2023-24 Celtics, that this is an all-time basketball team. I think at the end of the season, we're going to be looking at this team as a team in the history books for a team that won significantly throughout a regular season into the playoffs and potentially all the way to the title.
I want to touch on something. The reason with the bench, that's why you have Brown and Tatum for games like this. When it gets tough and no one's there, those are the guys that are going to make the plays. I don't want it to be Drew Holiday. I don't want it to be Kristaps Porzingis. I don't want it to be Sam Hauser, Derek White. No, I don't want it. If we're going to win a ring, it's got to be those two. And it was those two tonight. And that's what matters. So, again, and really at the end of the day, once you get rid of one of the top six, it does thin out our roster, especially when it's Porzingis, who is so solid and has been playing at an all-star level. It gets rough. Minnesota definitely had their fair share of injuries, down 2 starters. So I think it was a pretty level playing field. No Kristaps, no Gobert and Conley. I think those check out tonight. But again, it's a historic start for the C's, and it was a game that they really needed to win, and it was a game they did win. So it really is big time. And they got another one tomorrow night. And it'll be interesting to see what they do because you got fresh legs Kristaps, which you're really feeling happier about now, right now that he didn't play tonight. Obviously, you're going to be without Al Horford. The status of Damian Lillard, I believe, is up in the air. So it could be a funky game. Tatum has been phenomenal in Milwaukee. I believe he's had 40 plus in the past 3 times he's been in Milwaukee, dating back to that game 6, down 3-2 in the defending champion's house. But we don't got to talk about that right now. So
wait, I want to discuss this with y'all because I think we got to discuss this Minnesota Timberwolves team before we never see them again until next season or the finals. I don't know about y'all, but is Anthony Edwards the next Michael Jordan?
I'll tell you
Who's
what.
holding that, son?
Everybody's just kind of like, haha, yeah, but it's like, this is something out of the ordinary going on here with this player. It's like, this is not, I know other players, it's like, oh, look at Jalen Brunson, look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It's like, those players are very good, but I sent you and I sent Rob, I sent you and Justin those stats last time. Like, these players dribble a ton. Like, they dribble.
I was going to say that. He moves off all like something crazy.
I mean, they take up 20% of their team's offensive possessions typically. And Anthony Edwards, I mean, there are moments where the crowd is just bearing down on the court and the sound is just bearing down on the court. And those are the moments in which the crowd is supposed to mentally take out the other team. The other team is shook. It's like, uh-oh, the other team's on the Celtics are on a 6-0 run. We got to make a shot here. We got to have a good offensive possession here. We can't hear each other at all. We have fans screaming everything at us. And in those moments, it's like Anthony Edwards is at the park by himself, like not even phased whatsoever. And some of the reasons why I think the Minnesota Timberwolves won't win the title this year reside in them relying on Anthony Edwards way too much within their offense. In my personal opinion, I think their offense is a little bit too stagnant and there's not too much variety going on entirely within their offense. Although you see, they do have some big shot hitters in their offense, but Anthony Edwards, I mean, Michael Jordan with the Bulls, back in 1990, 91, we weren't, we weren't even alive, but people I'm sure weren't talking about Jordan being a Larry Bird-esque player, a Magic Johnson-esque player quite yet because he didn't have the titles to his name, although he did have the talent. Well, Anthony Edwards, we're seeing he has the talent. Maybe one day, maybe this Minnesota team is good enough, just quite good enough for him to lead an offense into the playoffs and maybe to a title because I really think that's how good he is. Michael Jordan, I know, is lofty, but it's going to take years and years and years, and I think something unique is happening here with Anthony Edwards. This is not the same as other players around the league. The confidence, the shot making ability, the overall skill, the persona, it's all there for Anthony Edwards to be an all-time great player. And I'm not just talking about, oh yeah, he's going to be top 75, top 50. Like, he could be right up there, folks, right up there.
That's something I noticed tonight with Ant. Minnesota's got their coach, man. Chris Finch is good, and his ability to work with Anthony Edwards off ball, and that's something I right off the bat I was like, wow, Anthony. It was my first time seeing him live. He doesn't go isolation nearly as much as you'd expect. And these younger guys, I mean, Tatum included, Tatum and Luka and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and really even Joel Embiid, super ISO heavy basketball. He is super talented at getting to his spots. And that is something that when you can do that and incorporate your isolation game, it's tough to stop you, because when you're getting the ball in your spots, the defense is dead. And you've seen it with guys like Durant and Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and, now Jason Tatum and those guys. When you get the ball in their spot, it's game over. More times than not, the offensive player is scoring. Ant's in that category. Again, I thought we did a phenomenal job on him tonight. I wasn't too impressed with him, despite 29 points, 11 for 25, 29 points on 25 shots is not super impressive, but he's had his game against us at home. Athletically, from an athletic standpoint, it's nuts. What he can do, he's a Skywalker. He can get to the basket at will. He's strong. He's physical. He can play defense. There's really not much he can do or he can't do. And I think the next step for him would probably be playmaking. I think there were a decent amount of turnovers off the double team for him. But again, we've seen that even with our own eyes with Jason Tatum. He's eventually, once you get to that, you've seen more basketball. You know the doubles are coming. You know where to get the ball. That's growth. But I mean, Ant, you're correct. We need to talk about Ant, because that is, if you were to ask me who's next, he's up there. And he might be one in terms of this new generation of the Halliburtons and Anthony Edwards, because he's super talented and he's two-way, man. He's two-way. That's not something you see a lot of anymore, is two-way superstars. He's going to lock up your best player, and he is going to, attack anyone. He's got the killer instinct too. It's something I've noticed. He was talking shit all night long to Jaylen Brown. They were going back and forth with each other. And I'll tell you what, JB, that's all NBA second team. That's a guy that's, making $304 million. He's been playing the best basketball. To go at him, it takes a different breed, I think.
I think as well with this game, and entirely like just the overall raw talent outside of the players we talk about, like Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I mean, those were clear stars out there. And Karl Anthony Towns, I guess we can throw him out too, right? I shouldn't disrespect Cat, but
he had a hell of a game.
I do want to talk about. I do want to talk about the Timberwolves team in this sense, where I just believe that Karl Anthony Towns, why not trade him to the New York Knicks, fleece 7 first-round picks, Dante DiVincenzo, a bunch of player assets, go trade him to the Knicks, right? Because they have somebody by the name of Naz Reid, right? Naz Reid, who is, I mean, if he had a good PR team, he might be worth $40 million as a big man. I'm just saying. If he had a good PR team, if he was top 10 draft pick with the team, he's going to be part of our core. I think he'd be probably in line for a max deal with the team, but he's not. He was picked in the second round out of LSU to the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he's just now grown his career all the way up until, I mean, he's a starting level big man, and he's basically their third string right now. And I believe that with the team that Minnesota has, potentially, you can move Cat and bring in Naz Reid as your tertiary big man next to Rudy Gobert. And the talent, he goes along with the talent out on the floor tonight, because, I mean, it's just one of those matchups where it's not only the star players, it's every other role player as well playing their role. And I thought with Minnesota, Naz Reid, he's just ultra impressive for them. But I want to ask you guys about Karl Anthony Towns. And Rob, you were there. Do you feel like his possessions, when he has the ball, do you feel like those are efficient possessions? Like, do you feel like the ball moves Do you feel like teams are like he might be scoring? Because I noticed on some of these possessions he might be scoring on them,
Right.
but when he has the ball, do you ever feel like any of their offense was moving tonight? And Franco, you can go on after Rob as well.
I was honestly, I think, more impressed with Cat tonight than I was with Anthony Edwards.
Really?
I think offensively, he poses a difficult presence because he can space the floor so well. Um, I think the ball dies in his hands
Yeah,
big time.
that's really my main problem with him. It's like it doesn't. You're not when I picture like an efficient, high-paced, fast-moving offense. I picture something like the Nuggets or the Celtics, where you're just constantly whipping the ball around,
But
you're
I will
making that
say,
extra pass, and it's like it doesn't feel like that happens when he has the ball.
I will say, ball movement wise, that was the most impressed I've seen. Best team I think this year. It was San Antonio Spurs level ball movement. It really, I mean, the off ball movement, the passing, it was really there. Down the stretch, they steered away from that and they went ISO heavy and they try to go your two best versus our two best, and that's where Minnesota lost it. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to go toe for toe with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at the TD Garden. You're not. But I will say, Cat was 2 of 7 behind the arc. A couple of them should have dropped. You figure he knocks down 2 more. He's approaching a 30-point game. I think he's a mismatch for a lot of big men. I think my problem with the Minnesota team, however, is Karl Anthony Towns. And I'm interested to hear what you have to say on this, Franco. I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is the second best player on a championship team. And again, you look at this roster, you got a young Ant. Cat is in his prime. Cat's ready to win. He's a super offensive talented big man. He can space the floor. Defensively, I think he's decent. He's not great, but he's decent. But again, I think it's this weird dynamic right now where you got Cat as your number 2, Franco, but I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is a second best player on a championship team.
Well, I know where Karl Anthony Towns would succeed is in Kristaps Porzingis' position. Like
Right.
that's the type of team he would succeed with. Kind of that kick out, stretch the floor, big man who's
Milwaukee.
not. Yeah, Milwaukee. There's a whole bunch of places that it would be funny if he went to New York, because imagine how quickly the ball would die with Julius Randle and Kristaps or Karl Anthony Towns
Brunson.
as your ball handlers or down low. Oh man, that would just be the death of New York, and I could see that city being lit on fire by their fans if they trade for Karl Anthony Towns. But I think that what he could bring to this team is being kind of that second to third option. It needs to be very centric around Anthony Edwards. And
Right.
also, I think it's very helpful that two players that are very helpful and I think are key components to Anthony Edwards succeeding more in this league are having veterans like Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert on the court with him. I mean,
But let me ask you this, Franco.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Currently, the Timberwolves are the 1 seed. And when you're the 1 seed, the expectation is to win, to make the NBA Finals and make a run to an NBA championship. It's the expectation. They are young, but can you do that with Cat as your second best player?
No, I think that this team is in need of one trade that I feel like they tried to round it out too much in Minnesota. I think they just need one better player than what Gobert is, and a better player than what Cat is, and what McDaniels is, because they've all developed, and Jaden McDaniels has developed into a very strong player for Minnesota. But I think if Edwards gets that 1-2 punch with him, then he'll
Right.
become that really elite player.
That's what they're missing. I think depth-wise, they got it, man. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is awesome off the bench. Naz Reid, I think, is awesome. I think he could be in the starting lineup, quite frankly. I agree with you there, Seamus. I think Naz Reid, defensively, offensively, he moves like a guard with the ball. If he can get that jump shooting up to right around 35%, he'd be deadly. What they're missing, though, is that 2. And again, is Cat, especially paired with Gobert, I think it gets a little awkward. Is it going to work? Can Karl Anthony Towns in the NBA Finals be the guy to do it for you? And it's not. I don't think he is. I think, again, Jaden McDaniels, dog. I think they got a player in him. He is your lengthy lockdown pest that you're going to throw in the other team's best player, chase him around all night, and if he fouls out, it's not the end of the world. Because you have players to step up. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I love. Mike Conley, you could probably get 2-3 more years of efficient basketball maybe out of him. Gobert, again, my problems kind of fall with Gobert because you're paying him all this money. It's working, but when the playoffs come, is it going to be Gobert? Is Gobert even a third option on a championship team? Because I don't think he is.
Not offensively.
Not offensively. And then defensively, I think he can get exposed once you pull him away from the rim. And when you run into a team like the Boston Celtics, right, or really the Oklahoma City Thunder, who's a very that's a possible second-round matchup, depending on how seeding works. They stretch you out. Chet can play perimeter basketball. And I think it's interesting because you talk about teams at the deadline. If I'm Minnesota's GM, I'm really taking a second to sit down and look at this constructed roster and think to myself, is this championship level? Because I don't. I don't think this is championship level. I think this is Utah Jazz 2019 level, where it's really effective in the regular season. But then when you come to the playoffs, you're sitting there thinking, oh, shit, Rudy Gobert is my second best player. And those types of players, Atlanta Hawks 2015, at the end of the day, Jeff Teague's your second best player. Paul Millsap's your second best player. The Indiana Pacers of 2013, Roy Hibbert is your second best player. David West is your second best player. These teams that find themselves having so much success in the regular season, but when the thick of it happens, your second best player needs to be there for you. And they have their guy. Ant's going to be up there. I agree with you, Seamus, when it's all said and done as one of the league's best, but they don't have their 2, and I don't even know if they have their 3.
Well, it's funny how we sit in this situation again because, I mean, look at what you brought out as an example. Rudy Gobert, he's been on the number 1 seed in the West before with the Utah Jazz. We've seen this picture play out before where, ooh, look at this good regular season team with the star player scoring a lot in isolation. And yes, he's making a step as a playmaker. And I gave my praise to Anthony Edwards, but like I said, with this Minnesota offense, it just doesn't look in rhythm all the time. Doesn't look like it's always moving. It looks very stagnant at moments. And I believe that this team that we're looking at right now, it's like, all right, look what squad Gobert's with. He's making $40 million. I do believe that in the playoffs, once it comes around, the one player that the Utah Jazz didn't have on their roster, right? The one factor that's a little bit different, right? Where you have Karl Anthony Towns, but it's Karl Anthony Towns. It's Karl Anthony Towns, and that's the problem where, yes, you have this other star next to Gobert, these two, you instead of having Donovan Mitchell, you have Anthony Edwards now, but then you have another star, but that other star is Karl Anthony Towns, and we've seen time and time again the problems with him in the playoffs. And playing, this is underrated. Let's picture this for a second. Kristaps Porzingis, Franco, you mentioned earlier that Karl Anthony Towns would play perfect in Kristaps Porzingis' role. Now, I think from a skill level standpoint and what he is, that is theoretically correct. However, it's about the personalities and the sacrifice and the IQ, right? Kristaps Porzingis knows his role on the Boston Celtics as the third option. He knows that he is not going to be in isolation, in the low post, constantly being the number 1 option. He knows that some possessions are going to go towards Jason Tatum, are going to go towards Jaylen Brown. Some may even go towards Al Horford making a huge 3. Derek White, Drew Holiday. and it's going to be more equally distributed. Whereas when I look at Karl Anthony Towns play, I don't see that vision within his game that, oh, I am the second option or I'm the third option on my team and I need to distribute it around the key. No, I don't see that at all. I see Karl Anthony Towns is taking everybody one-on-one, whether it's in the low post or top of the key. And yes, he can be dangerous at times, but I just don't know if he owns that sacrifice, that level of IQ that a player like Kristaps Porzingis does have on the Celtics to do such a thing like we mentioned in that scenario where if Karl Anthony Towns were to be moved to the Celtics in some random hypothetical scenario, that he would do as well as Kristaps Porzingis. And he is a huge reason why I believe this team is not going to be there at the end when it's all said and done, hoisting up the Larry O'Brien trophy. Because for as many of the flaws we talk about with Gobert and the ability to pull him out during the playoffs and the clunky offense between him and Cat, there is another star player there in Cat that Gobert didn't see back in Utah. Of course, Anthony Edwards, Donovan Mitchell, not exactly on the same plane, but similar in their roles on the two teams. But I think Cat being that other superstar, I don't see it. I don't see it for as much talent as this Minnesota Timberwolves team has and the depth they have. You look at their stars, it all lies on Cat being more efficient than he's been his entire career now in the playoffs. And I just don't see a sign, especially tonight's game, of that happening at all.
He falls into such a weird category, right? Because he really is a big man, a center. He's the 7-foot big man that can space. I mean, again, I think his ability to play perimeter basketball, but also dump it into the post and go to work with the footwork. I think his footwork is there and his physicality is there. And I think offensively, he's the super gifted, 3-level big man. But it's like, then you got Gobert there. So it's like, okay, well, the whole advantage with having Karl Anthony Towns, similar to Kristaps Porzingis, is being able to stretch your opponent out and attack the rim. So it's like, okay, well, you lose that advantage with Karl Anthony Towns with Gobert being there. And I think that is why you saw the struggles tonight with the Celtics in terms of the rim protecting, was because the paint was open. And that's the advantage Karl Anthony Towns brings to your team is he's a terrific offensive scorer, and he can open up the paint for guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Kyle Anderson, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels to get to the rim, Naz Reid, right, to attack the rim. So it's almost like I kind of feel like a rotation, a starting five of Ant, Conley, McDaniels, Naz Reid, and Cat might present a bigger threat. However, then it's like this whole on the opposing side, it's like, well, Rudy Gobert has been the constant defensively, where it's like he is considered the anchor. So it's like, can they defensively, which is how they've been winning games, keep that if they don't have Gobert? And then offensively, do they have enough without Cat to successfully win, execute down the stretch? So it's like this weird thing between, can they do it without A and can they do it without B? And I guess with the Timberwolves, because they're so new and so young, it's kind of just a wait and see what happens. Maybe they can, maybe they can't.
Well, also, maybe I think I just thought about this point where we might be overthinking the point just a little bit, because we do think about, okay, they have Naz Reid, Gobert, and Towns, and we're kind of thinking about it in the sense of, okay, you have to find minutes almost for those two to play together or stagnate them within the rotation. But I'm almost thinking how tonight's game played out. It's like, I almost feel like at the end of the year, they can do whatever they want with their big man rotation because they have Naz Reid, because they have Cat, because they have Gobert. They could go, you know what? Screw it. Gobert, you're going to sit on the bench for an entire playoff series. Highly doubt that would ever happen, but you're going to sit on a bench for an entire playoff series. We're going to have Cat and Naz Reid play on and off. And then we're actually the more important players. We're going to have to talk about like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, the Kyle Andersons who completely destroyed us tonight, and other role players on their roster. Jordan McLaughlin. I think you look at their point guard situation. I think that might be actually their weakest link. Mike Conley, for as good as he is, and he's a veteran player who's great at making decisions on the basketball floor and still athletic enough to keep up with the best in the game, he is older, didn't play tonight. They had him resting. You're, of course, resting him to preserve him for the playoffs. We're doing the same with Al Horford every other night. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Al Horford plays tomorrow or not in Milwaukee because he played so many minutes tonight. But after Mike Conley, it's Jordan McLaughlin. So you have a kind of an older point guard, not necessarily in his prime, still very good. And then you have Jordan McLaughlin, who's great player who's made a great career for himself in Minnesota and has came all the way from being a two-way player to being a standard player to being now a rotation player. But still, I think that's kind of a weak link on their roster a little bit. Alexander Walker, he's kind of a combo guard, a little like I don't know how much he can really handle the ball and run an offense. But you look at their entire squad, and I think there's a case for them to go far. I think their offense relies a little bit too much on Anthony Edwards, and it looks a little bit too stagnant at times. But I almost think we have this whole conversations about Naz Reid and Gobert and Towns, and it's like, oh yeah, they're not going to be able to do it because of Towns. Then at the end of the year, they might be able to do whatever with their versatility in regards to their bigs. But then it'll be something like, oh, we have to play Jordan McLaughlin a couple minutes in the third quarter, and teams are just hunting him game after game after game in the playoffs. Or, Mike Conley is injured and something happens there with their rotation. And I will note this too. Trade deadline will happen. These teams will look different later on in the season. A month from now, trade deadline's only 27 or so days away. Mm-hmm. And it could look a little bit different, but tonight's matchup, we talked about the Celtics for half the show. We talked about the Minnesota Timberwolves for half the show. I wouldn't be opposed to watching these two teams play a 7-game series in June. I really wouldn't. Tonight's game was an instant classic by every means, and I'm glad to watch it again on replay over and over and over again because I think, come on NBA, put this one on YouTube for everyone to watch. This one has to be on YouTube. Come on.
Tonight we got some classics around the league. Some big games. I'd like to address that in terms of Eastern Conference. Philly 132-139 overtime loss to the Hawks without Embiid. Chicago's bouncing back. They beat Houston 124-119, also in overtime, a bunch of overtime games tonight. The Pacers beat the Wizards 112-104. So a couple of Eastern Conference things. Miami Heat also finally were defeated by the Oklahoma City Thunder 128-120 at home. So again, big night around the association. Celtics tomorrow night are going to be playing the Milwaukee Bucks. Bucks are losers of 2 straight, 5-5 in the last 10. Boston, obviously, winners of 1 in a row, 8-2 in the last 10, 29-8 on the season, have a 4-game lead over the 2-seeded Milwaukee Bucks, who are 25-12. Damian Lillard is questionable, along with a couple players on the Boston Celtics. However, the Celtics were able to keep their streak going at home, 127-120 at home on the parquet. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were phenomenal in all aspects of the game. Before we close out here, let's take one more look at the players of the game. I want to emphasize that. The players. 45, 4, 2, and 1 for Mr. Jason Tatum. And then Mr. 304 has proven every single person wrong. 35, 11, 3, 2, and 1 for Jaylen Brown. He was phenomenal. And guys, we will see you tomorrow night after the final buzzer in Milwaukee. Rob, Seamus, Franco, from all of us over here at Celtics Talk Weekly. Thank you so much for watching. Until tomorrow night, go Seas.